Welcome to Cryptic Chronicles, where the shadows hold secrets and the unknown beckons. Tonight, we journey to the forgotten town of Briarwood, where an invitation to a grand masquerade ball reveals a sinister truth. As the fog rolls in and the darkness deepens, join us as we uncover the chilling tale of Masquerade of Shadows. Prepare yourself for a night of mystery, horror, and the eternal dance of death. Let the story begin.
In the quiet town of Briarwood, life moved slowly, as if the world had forgotten it. The town had its secrets dark, whispered tales passed down through generations, but most residents preferred to live in blissful ignorance. It had been years since anyone spoke of Briarwood Manor, the grand estate perched on the hill overlooking the town. It was said to be abandoned, a relic of a time long past, and no one dared to approach it. One crisp autumn morning, as the first hints of winter crept into the air, the townspeople received an unusual delivery. Thick, cream-colored envelopes with gold-embossed seals appeared in their mailboxes. The seal bore an unfamiliar crest, intricate and ancient, and the envelopes themselves were of a quality far beyond anything they had seen. Curiosity sparked throughout the town, but also a sense of unease. The invitation inside read, "You are cordially invited to a grand masquerade ball at Briarwood Manor. The Count of Briarwood requests your presence for an evening of revelry and delight. Please join us for an unforgettable night under the stars." The invitation was signed with a flourish, "The Count of Briarwood." The date was set for the upcoming weekend, and as the day approached, excitement mingled with a quiet dread. No one knew who the Count was or why he had chosen now to host such an event, but the allure of the mysterious evening was too strong to resist. Sarah, a young woman known for her inquisitive nature, was particularly captivated by the invitation. She had always been drawn to the unknown, to the stories that others feared to tell. Despite the warnings of her friends, who spoke of ghosts and curses, she decided she would attend. She spent days preparing, choosing a flowing crimson gown and a delicate mask adorned with feathers. When the night of the ball arrived, Briarwood was cloaked in an otherworldly fog. The town, usually so familiar, now felt distant and strange. The mist clung to the ground like a living thing, swirling around Sarah's feet as she made her way to the manor. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of dead leaves, as if the very earth was holding its breath in anticipation. As Sarah approached the manor, she was struck by its imposing presence. The mansion was grander than she had imagined, with towering spires and intricate stonework that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air grew colder with each step, and she could almost hear the walls whispering secrets to each other in a language she couldn't understand. Lanterns lined the path to the entrance, their flames flickering weakly in the cold breeze, casting long, twisted shadows that danced on the ground. Inside, the atmosphere was intoxicating, but not in the way Sarah had expected. The ballroom was vast, with high ceilings and crystal chandeliers that cast shimmering light on the marble floors. But there was something wrong, something deeply unsettling. The walls seemed to close in, and the air was thick, almost suffocating, with a scent that was sweet yet rancid, like decaying flowers. The guests, their faces obscured by elaborate masks, moved with an unnatural grace, their footsteps silent on the cold stone floor. As she wandered through the crowd, Sarah felt a creeping unease. The guests' laughter echoed strangely in the vast hall, too sharp, too high-pitched, and their eyes, those dark, glittering eyes, seemed to follow her every move. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that beneath the masks, the guests' faces were pale, almost deathly white, with veins that stood out like black threads under their skin. Their smiles were too wide, revealing teeth that were too sharp, glistening in the dim light. The music that filled the ballroom was haunting, a melody that seemed to seep into her bones, slowing her heartbeat until it matched the eerie rhythm. The more she tried to ignore it, the more it consumed her, pulling her deeper into the nightmare. The guests, though polite and charming, has strange quality about them. Their movements were too fluid, their laughter too perfect, their eyes too dark. It was as if they were mimicking humanity, but something vital was missing. Sarah could feel the manor watching her, the walls pressing in, the shadows lengthening and curling around her like fingers. She was being suffocated by the atmosphere, her breath coming in short gasps as the air grew colder. The once elegant ballroom now seemed like a tomb, and the guests were the specters that haunted it. As the night wore on, Sarah found herself drawn to the edges of the ballroom, where the light faded and the darkness grew thicker, almost tangible. The shadows clung to the walls like cobwebs, and the music became distant, a dull throb that pounded in her skull. She slipped through a side door, the heavy wood creaking under her touch, and into a dimly lit corridor. The walls were lined with portraits, each one depicting the same man, a tall figure with pale skin and piercing eyes. The nameplate beneath each painting read, "The Count of Briarwood." What struck her most was that in each portrait, the Count appeared exactly the same, untouched by time. Her pulse quickened as she moved deeper into the manor. The corridors twisted and turned, leading her into a maze of darkened rooms and forgotten hallways. The further she went, the more the atmosphere changed. The warmth of the ballroom faded, replaced by a biting chill that cut through her gown. The walls seemed to close in on her, the shadows growing thicker and more oppressive, and the silence was deafening. In one forgotten room, she found an old, dusty book lying open on a table. The pages were brittle, and the text was written in a language she did not recognize. But the illustrations were clear enough. They depicted rituals, ancient and dark, involving blood and shadow. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the book detailed the history of the manor and its inhabitants. As Sarah dropped the book, the cold, almost musical voice cut through her thoughts. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, my dear," the voice said, smooth and cold. She turned to see the Count standing in the doorway, his eyes glowing with an eerie light that pierced the darkness. He was exactly as he appeared in the portraits, unchanged by time, his pale face framed by dark hair that fell to his shoulders, his lips curled into a predatory smile. Panic surged through Sarah. She bolted from the room, her footsteps echoing through the silent halls. The manor seemed to twist around her, the corridors elongating, narrowing, as if the walls themselves were alive and conspiring to trap her. The air grew colder with each step, and the darkness thickened, swallowing the flickering light of the candles that lined the walls. Behind her, she could hear the soft, steady footsteps of the Count, unhurried, as if he knew there was no escape. The shadows around her seemed to reach out, brushing against her skin like cold fingers, and the silence was pierced only by the sound of her ragged breathing and the distant, echoing laughter that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Finally, Sarah burst back into the ballroom, gasping for breath. But the scene that greeted her was a vision from a nightmare. The guests had removed their masks, revealing faces twisted by hunger and malice. Their eyes, once glittering with dark amusement, were now hollow and empty, their skin pale and translucent, stretched tight over skull-like faces. The scent of blood hung heavy in the air, and Sarah realized with a sickening horror that the metallic tang she had noticed earlier was the scent of fresh blood, human blood. The ballroom floor was no longer the gleaming marble she had seen earlier. It was slick with blood, pools of it seeping from the lifeless bodies of the townspeople who had attended the ball. Their faces were frozen in expressions of terror, their throats slashed, their bodies drained of life. They lay scattered across the floor like broken dolls, their crimson gowns and suits stained dark with their own blood. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized some of the faces among the dead friends, neighbors, people she had known her entire life. The reality of their fate crashed over her like a tidal wave, and she stumbled backward, her mind reeling with horror. The guests, no, the vampires were no longer dancing. They stood in a circle, their bodies unnaturally still, their heads turning in unison to face her. Their lips pulled back in grotesque smiles, revealing sharp, blood-stained teeth. They had feasted on the townspeople, draining them dry, and now their hunger was directed at her. The Count approached her slowly, his movements deliberate, predatory. His eyes locked onto hers, glowing with an ancient hunger. "You were the final guest we needed," he whispered, his voice like silk, smooth and deadly. "The last piece of our eternal feast." Sarah backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The vampires closed in around her, their hollow eyes gleaming with anticipation, their sharp teeth bared in hungry grins. Cold hands grasped her arms, her shoulders, pulling her into the crowd. She struggled, but their grip was like iron, unyielding. The ballroom, once grand and elegant, now felt like a tomb, its grandeur a cruel mockery of the horror that was about to unfold. The Count leaned in close, his breath cold against her skin. "Don't be afraid," he whispered, his lips brushing against her neck. "This will only hurt forever." With a sharp pain, his fangs pierced her skin, and Sarah screamed, the sound swallowed by the darkness that consumed her. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the blood-stained faces of the townspeople, their lifeless eyes staring back at her, as if they were warning her of the fate that awaited her. The next morning, Briarwood was shrouded in a thick mist, the manor standing silent and foreboding on the hill, as it always had. The townsfolk who had attended the ball were never seen again. The invitations continued to appear, delivered to new towns, to new victims, beckoning them to the eternal masquerade. Briarwood Manor remained, a monument to the horrors within, waiting for the next curious soul to accept the invitation. And so, the Count of Briarwood fed, eternally youthful, forever waiting for the next curious soul to accept his invitation.
Thank you for joining us on this dark journey into the heart of Briarwood Manor. If you enjoyed the chilling tale of Masquerade of Shadows, please leave a like and subscribe to Cryptic Chronicles for more spine-tingling stories. Don't forget to explore our other videos for more eerie adventures. Until next time, stay curious and beware of the shadows.